The departure hall of Terminal B shimmered with movement and noise. Suitcases rolled over polished floors, boarding announcements layered over one another. Screens flickered with destinations in blue and white rows. It was early evening at one of the busiest international airports in the country, and every line was long. Aisha Morgan moved through the crowd with steady steps. She wore a charcoal blazer over a soft cream blouse. Her carry-on was compact and structured. In her hand was a slim leather folder. She had flown through dozens of airports in the last 3 years. She knew the rhythm of departure halls, the tension, the impatience, the quiet hierarchies that formed in lines. She joined the business class check-in queue for Flight 908 to London. Ahead of her, a couple argued softly about seat upgrades. Behind her, a teenager scrolled endlessly on his phone. A large digital board flashed final call for another flight. Aisha inhaled slowly and checked the time. She was early. She always was. When her turn came, she stepped forward and offered a small, polite smile. "Good evening." The airline agent barely looked up at first. His name tag read Daniel. He extended his hand automatically. "Passport, please." She handed it over. He scanned it. The screen in front of him flashed red. Daniel blinked. He scanned it again. Red. His posture shifted. The slight boredom in his face tightened into something else. He glanced at the monitor, then at her, then back at the monitor. "One moment," he said. The line behind her grew still. He leaned toward a second agent at the next counter and whispered something. The second agent looked at Aisha briefly before nodding. Daniel pressed a button under the counter. A small light above his station changed color. Aisha noticed. "What seems to be the issue?" she asked calmly. "It is just a routine system check," Daniel replied, though his tone no longer matched the words. A supervisor approached within seconds, a tall woman in a navy suit with a clipped expression. "What do we have?" the supervisor asked. "Passport flag," Daniel said quietly. The supervisor extended her hand. "Ma'am, I will need to see your passport." Aisha handed it back without hesitation. The supervisor scanned it at her own terminal. Read. The supervisor's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, your passport has been flagged for additional screening." "For what reason?" Aisha asked. "It does not specify here. We will need to escort you to secondary screening." The word escort carried weight. It was loud without being loud. A murmur began in the line. A man 2 spots back leaned toward his partner and whispered something. A woman lifted her phone slightly, pretending to check a message but clearly recording. Aisha kept her shoulders relaxed. "I travel internationally every month," she said evenly. "Has there been an error?" "We cannot discuss details here," the supervisor replied. 2 uniformed airport security officers approached. One stood slightly to her left, the other to her right. "Ma'am, please come with us." There was no accusation spoken aloud, but the silence around her felt heavy. The teenager behind her stopped scrolling. A businessman craned his neck. Someone muttered. "I knew something was off." Aisha turned slowly toward the line. She saw the cameras, the curiosity, the judgment forming in real time. She nodded once. "Of course." They walked her across the departure hall toward a glass-walled interview room near immigration control. It sat visibly along the corridor like an aquarium, transparent on all sides. People could see in. That was the point. Inside, there was a metal table and 3 chairs, a camera in the corner, a small digital clock mounted on the wall. She sat. The supervisor remained standing. A security officer positioned himself near the door. The airport continued, moving outside the glass. Travelers passed by, glancing in. Some slowed, some stared openly. The supervisor opened a tablet. "State your full name." "Aisha Morgan." "Purpose of travel." "Business." "What type of business?" "Consulting." "What field?" "Aviation." The supervisor paused. "In what capacity?" Aisha folded her hands on the table. "Cybersecurity." The supervisor's eyes flickered slightly, but she continued. "How often do you travel internationally?" "Approximately twice a month." "For how long?" 3 years. "And why is that?" "Because I am assigned where risk is highest." The supervisor looked up. "Assigned by whom?" Aisha met her gaze. "That is classified." The words seemed to irritate the supervisor. "Ma'am, if you do not cooperate, I am cooperating," Aisha interrupted softly. "You asked?" I answered. Outside the glass, a small crowd had formed. Subtle, casual, watching. Phones angled discreetly. The supervisor tapped on the tablet. "Your passport triggered an internal alert." "What kind of alert?" "It does not specify." Aisha tilted her head slightly. So, you do not know why I am flagged? The supervisor hesitated. We are following procedure. Aisha nodded slowly. Procedure without explanation. The supervisor did not respond. Minutes passed, questions repeated in different forms. Travel history, funding source, employer name, length of contracts. Aisha answered precisely, calmly, without irritation, but she noticed something. No one accused her of a crime. No one stated a violation. Just flagged. After nearly 15 minutes, a man in a dark gray suit approached the glass room quickly. He carried a secured tablet and wore an airport executive badge. He entered without knocking. What is happening here? He asked sharply. The supervisor straightened. Passport flagged during check-in. We are conducting secondary screening. The man looked at Aisha. Recognition flashed across his face. He looked back at the supervisor. Did you review the flag details? It only displayed red priority. He inhaled slowly, then turned the tablet toward her. The screen displayed a message header marked Confidential Coordination. Below it read VIP Arrival, Federal Aviation Cybersecurity Auditor Level 7 Clearance Escort to Operations Office. Do not delay. The supervisor's face drained of color. The security officers exchanged glances. The executive looked at Aisha with measured respect. Ms. Morgan, we were notified of your arrival. Aisha's voice remained even. I was escorted here instead. The executive nodded once. That will be addressed. The supervisor swallowed. There was a red alert. Yes, the executive replied. A VIP internal alert. Not a threat alert. The word threat lingered in the air. Outside the glass, passengers continued watching, unaware of the shift. The executive turned to the supervisor. Release her immediately. The supervisor stepped back. You are free to go, she said quietly. Aisha stood slowly. She gathered her folder. Before exiting, she paused. Flagged does not always mean dangerous, she said. Her voice was not loud, but the room carried it. The executive gestured toward the door. I will escort you personally. They stepped out of the glass enclosure. The small crowd parted. The man who had whispered earlier avoided eye contact. The woman who had recorded lowered her phone slightly but did not stop filming. Aisha walked with calm authority now, the executive at her side. They passed the check-in counters again. Daniel stared at his keyboard. The supervisor remained inside the glass room, speaking urgently into her radio. As they moved toward a secured corridor, the executive spoke quietly. My apologies for the mishandling. Your arrival notification was sent internally, and yet, Aisha replied, it was interpreted differently. He nodded. Yes, they entered a restricted access hallway away from public view. Inside the operations office, several airport officials waited. Monitors displayed network schematics and real-time system dashboards. Aisha placed her folder on the table. Shall we begin? She said. 2 hours later, after reviewing firewall protocols and compliance logs, Aisha walked back through a private passage toward her departure gate. Word had already traveled. Staff members glanced at her differently now. Not suspicious. Aware. At the gate, boarding had begun. The same supervisor stood near the podium. When she saw Aisha approach, her posture stiffened. Ms. Morgan, she said, voice restrained. Your seat is ready. Aisha offered a small nod. Thank you. As she scanned her boarding pass, the scanner turned green. No red, no whisper. She walked down the jet bridge alone. Inside the aircraft, she took her seat by the window. Outside, ground crews moved under floodlights. She watched them for a moment before closing her eyes. Across the airport, in the break room, near check-in, Daniel replayed the incident in his mind. He had not accused her. He had not raised his voice. He had simply followed procedure. But he had assumed. The supervisor completed her incident report with careful language. System misunderstanding. Internal miscommunication. Protocol confusion. None of it captured the truth of what had happened in that glass room. Bias did not always shout. Sometimes it simply waited for a red screen. As Flight 908 lifted into the night sky, Aisha looked out over the city lights fading below. She thought about the passengers who had watched her, the ones who recorded, the ones who whispered, the ones who said nothing. Flagged. The word echoed in her mind. In cybersecurity, a flag meant attention. In airports, it meant suspicion. In life, it often meant something else entirely. She opened her laptop once the seatbelt sign turned off and began drafting her internal audit notes. Section 1. Arrival Coordination Breakdown. Section 2. Secondary Screening, Misuse. Section 3. Implicit Bias, Exposure Risk. She paused before typing the final line. Perception can become vulnerability if left unchecked. She saved the document. Around her, other passengers slept or watched movies. No one on this flight knew what had unfolded in the terminal. No one would announce it over the intercom, but somewhere in the airport database, a report would now exist. A note about procedural reform, a recommendation about discretion, a quiet reminder that red did not always mean threat. And sometimes, the person behind the glass was not the danger. Sometimes she was the one there to protect them all. The flight leveled above the clouds and the cabin lights dimmed to a soft amber glow. Aisha kept her laptop open, the screen reflecting faintly against the window beside her. London was 7 hours away, long enough to think, long enough to remember. She had been flagged before, not by systems, by people. In conference rooms where she was mistaken for support staff, in hotels where reception asked twice for her credit card, in board meetings where her recommendations were questioned until repeated by someone else. Bias rarely announced itself. It disguised itself as caution, as policy, as procedure. She scrolled through airport network logs transmitted during the audit session. There it was. The internal arrival notice had been properly coded: VIP coordination, restricted visibility, automatic red indicator. The system had worked. People had not. She closed the laptop and leaned back. Across the aisle, a middle-aged woman glanced at her, then quickly looked away. Aisha wondered if she had been in the terminal earlier, if she had watched through the glass. Airports were strange ecosystems. Temporary communities built on urgency. Strangers forming opinions in seconds. Departures and arrivals layered with quiet judgments. The glass room had not been private by accident. Visibility was a deterrent. It signaled control, but that visibility cut both ways. It exposed the one inside, and it exposed the ones making decisions. Back at the airport, the executive director convened a late meeting. The supervisor sat stiffly at the table. "We followed protocol," she insisted. "You followed partial protocol," the director replied. Without context, there was a red alert, and you interpreted it. Silence filled the room. Daniel sat farther down the table, quiet. "What would you have done differently?" the director asked him directly. Daniel hesitated. "I would have checked the flag classification before escalating publicly." The director nodded. "Exactly. The incident would not become a scandal. No viral video had spread widely yet, but reform rarely required headlines. Sometimes it required discomfort." Aisha reopened her laptop and began drafting an addendum. Section 4. Human factor vulnerability. She typed deliberately. Technical systems are neutral. Interpretation is not. When alerts lack clarity, bias fills the gap. Training must address cognitive shortcuts under pressure. Secondary screening must preserve dignity unless immediate risk is verified. She paused, then added another line. Public containment rooms create reputational damage before evidence exists. Recommend private review unless active threat confirmed. She saved again. The plane hummed steadily through the dark. She imagined the supervisor replaying the moment the tablet had turned toward her. The instant realization, the shift from authority to exposure. Embarrassment could become defensiveness or growth. Aisha preferred the latter. When the cabin crew began preparing for landing hours later, dawn stretched faintly along the horizon. She packed her laptop carefully. As the aircraft descended, she felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle back into place. She was not flagged because she was dangerous. She was flagged because she was trusted. But the path between those two interpretations could be perilously thin. The wheels touched down smoothly on wet runway. Passengers applauded softly, as they sometimes did after long flights. Aisha did not clap. She simply looked forward. Another airport awaited. Another system. Another set of procedures. And perhaps another moment where red would appear on a screen. This time, she hoped, someone would pause long enough to ask a better question before reaching for an escort. As the aircraft taxied toward the gate, she whispered the same thought that had carried her through glass rooms and boardrooms alike. Visibility is power, and how you use it defines who you are.